Hey, everybody. Welcome to Called Up the Prospects podcast presented by Wonderful Pistachios. I'm Chris Peters from FloHockey and joined, as always, by our friend from Elite Prospects, Cam Robinson. And Cam, what a wonderful day it is. The weather's getting warmer. It's postseason right around the corner. Trade deadline's done. I mean, have you recovered from the maelstrom of trades that came in late on the trade deadline day last week?
It was fun. Hey, that was exciting. I was glad that
It
they
was.
waited for like the whole chaos at the end there for me to get off a ferry. I was working with some slow internet in the middle of the ocean there for about an hour and a half of it. So it was nice of them to hold off until the deadline to really pull some big ones out of their hat.
Yeah, and we will talk a little bit about the deadline today. We're going to talk about some of the trades that were made that involve prospects because there were a couple of notable prospects move. We won't spend a ton of time on it. Obviously, we're about a week past the deadline, but I do want to cover that a little bit. Going to talk a little bit about some of the prospects that have really been jumping up this year. A lot of really impressive individual performances throughout the season. Guys that you've heard of, some that you might not be as familiar with, and then also it's college free agent season. It's not the strongest class, but it's worth talking about. A lot of teams will continue to sign players. And then we'll also talk about some of the NHL draft prospects. A lot of news in the NHL draft world. Unfortunately, a lot of injury news and other things like that. We will get to that later in the show. But before we move on, we want to, of course, thank Wonderful Pistachios for being our presenting sponsor and remind you that Wonderful Pistachios is a good source of protein with zero guilt. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, serving you over 10% of your daily value. And Cam, let's get into it. Let's talk because I mean we got the postseason is here in college hockey. It is right around the corner in junior hockey. But really, the thing that kind of sets the table for this part of the season is the NHL trade deadline, and there were some key moves made. We talked a lot on this podcast about the New York Islanders having to definitely move Brock Nelson because the likelihood of a strong return was too great, and they got a strong return. The key thing that Lou Lamoriello wanted in that trade was Callum Ritchie, and he got Callum Ritchie. So let's talk a little bit about Callum Ritchie. Was drafted by Colorado, a late first round pick. He has really picked up his game in his draft, his subsequent draft, post draft seasons. Has been a top player in the OHL, has been, a top performer in big moments, and then also was part of Canada's team at the World Junior Championship this winter. So, I mean, I feel like that was the kind of trade, if you're going to deal a guy that has been with your team for a long time, that felt like the kind of trade that you needed to make. And I think the Islanders did very well for themselves. What did you think?
Yeah, I liked it for the Islanders for sure. Brock Nelson's a good player, but obviously expiring deal at his age, has a history of scoring goals and playing down the middle. So top rental center was going to bring in a pretty good haul. And Cal Ritchie in a first is a very strong haul for them. Now, at the same time, I will say this is that I was told that Ritchie had been floated out in a couple different scenarios, all for big name players. So it's not shocking that he ended up moving for Nelson. But, I had heard that he was, potentially in a JT Miller trade before Miller went to the Rangers. So Colorado, they recognize it's like, hey, our window's still open. Cal Ritchie is going to be a good piece long term, but we want to add something impactful right now. And so at the end of the day, they felt moving him for Brock Nelson was going to be enough to help move the needle. And we'll see if they look to try to extend even Nelson too. But when it comes to Ritchie this year, he's on about the same point pace as he was last year on his big season. Goal scoring's down. He's in a bit of a slump right now where he's only got 4 or 5 points in the last 8 games. So kind of cooling at a bad time for as the OHL push comes in towards the playoffs. But I do wonder, though, I had a lot of people reach out to me, especially Islanders fans, like right away being like, is this our new top prospect? Is he like a number one? Like, is he going to be a first liner sort of thing? And for my money, I don't think he's a slam dunk top 6 guy. Like, I think he's, probably, if I'm hedging my bets, more of a middle 6 guy long term in the NHL. And that's not even just based off of, he wasn't great at the World Juniors. He was fine. But they're trying to hang their hat on him and Easton Cowan. And those guys just aren't really, I don't think, that level of player long term and even at that U20 level. So I think he's a good prospect. I think he's a smart prospect. I think he will play and have a lengthy NHL career. But, I don't think we can just like anoint him the Islanders' best prospect right now and be like, this is a locked in top 6 guy. I'd probably still save that for Cole Eiserman, that he is their top prospect.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow up is, if it isn't Cal Ritchie, who do you like? And I mean, I think Yzerman is probably the idea. And I think that they're in that way, they have those similar kind of concerns. Like, what is the overall NHL upside? Is Cole Yzerman, who is a tremendous goal scorer, is he going to be a 40-50 goal scorer, which is a tremendous bar to clear? But is he even going to be a
Mm-hmm.
consistent 30 goal scorer in the NHL? Not every guy that lights it up in junior is going to have that scoring translate. And we're going to talk about another guy later that could potentially be the case for as well. But I do think that to me, there's a little bit of I think that the differences for Cal Ritchie, I think, there's a size factor for him. I do think he has high-end hockey sense. I think that he makes a lot of good plays. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think he forces it as much as a Cole Yzerman does. But at the same time, you see some of those things is, pace, other things like that. Are they going to be there and good enough? And so those are some of the things that I definitely would share some concern about. However, I think that when you think about the fact that you're trading a player on an expiring contract, when you think about the first round draft pick that you're getting, you are adding something to your mix that quite frankly, the Islanders are very shallow in the prospect department. They don't have a ton of top end guys. I think they're, other guys like Danny Nelson, I think is going to increase the value. I thought that, he showed at the World Juniors that's a guy that has a lot of NHL caliber tools. That's probably going to be another guy that's more of a middle six guy, but he's going to help your team down the road. And, right now the Bridgeport Islanders have been among the worst teams in the AHL. So if you're looking for help from there, you're trying to see who are the guys that could potentially give you some assistance there. I just think that what really needs to happen for the Islanders going forward is they need to figure out exactly what the plan is. And Lou won't say anything about a rebuild. And I don't think that that's necessarily the path forward, but they do have to get younger. They do have to find more of these opportunities. So I do think that the Ritchie trade in some ways, especially given what they were giving up, they accomplished what they needed to with that particular trade. And whether or not Cal Ritchie is the number one prospect in their system, because I think there's an argument for it, but I'm with you where I'm not like, I can't put the 100% stamp of approval on it. I just think that there's a lot of work left to do for the Islanders. And it starts with compiling those draft picks and making good selections and getting guys that are less these kind of tweener, uncertain kind of players that seems to be the kind of player they've drafted an awful lot, with the exception of Noah Dobson, though now that we've seen him, this season, you start wondering again, was it that kind of same thing? So a lot of interesting scenarios there. I did also want to point out the Boston Bruins did get a little bit deeper in their prospect system. Not a ton, but they made some moves that helped them in the longer term. Fraser Minton from Toronto goes over in the Brandon Carlo trade. Will Zellers, who's one of the top scorers in the USHL, was a piece of the Charlie Coyle trade. So they do add some prospects. That's another, like if you're a Boston Bruins fan, you're saying, okay, well, we've clearly hit some sort of reset button here. What is the next step? And I don't think either Fraser Minton or Will Zellers is going to be a guy that's going to, significantly change your prospect system. But, what can you say about those ads, from your perspective, and just kind of where the Bruins go from here, trading away Brad Marchand, trading away Brandon Carlo, Charlie Coyle. I mean, there were a lot of pieces that went out, and, you look at what came back, and I don't know how excited you're supposed to be about it, but it's not nothing. We'll say that for sure. What thoughts on that return?
Yeah, it's not nothing. It's interesting. So, I did a lot of thinking about Boston here because, it was a hot second ago where they, just torched the league in the regular season, right? And looked like they were still had a lot of life left in their contention window. Then they went out and spent a bunch of money that last offseason, right? Gave Elias Lindholm that big contract. Signed Zadorov, right? Like they added veteran now pieces at, big price tags and lengthy term. And now they recognized that they're not good enough and that it was a seller's market, and they capitalized on that. And so it's like, I like that. but at the same time, now they've kind of got a foot on both sides of the line here, which is a difficult place to be. So at least they recognized and took advantage of a seller's market and did fairly well, just moving out those pieces. I know with Marchand, like I was fully told like on deadline day that they had made a couple different offers, even a little bump on what he was making right now, Marchand on his current deal, but he was looking at 7+ million on a long-term deal, or a short-term deal, I should say, on a multi-year deal. And then when they couldn't agree to it, they basically said like, where do you want to go? Do you want to go to Florida? You want to go to Vegas? Like, you want to go? Where do you want to go? And so he was like, I'll go to Florida. And so they got him for a song, basically, right, with that conditional first, which will turn to a second. So when it comes to Fraser Minten for Toronto, easy money to move, in my opinion. He's a bottom 6 projection. He's a physical guy. He has good leadership skills. He's got a good enough shot that you could be like, yeah, he could score 15 goals in the league, year over year, maybe push a 20 spot if he has himself some good line mates or something like that. But I think this is a player that was overrated simply because he was a Maple Leaf prospect, right? And because the Maple Leafs don't ever have very many good prospects. And so, he has a really kind of like a mature game, which helped him look really good in camp as a youngster. And, he's played 15 games for the Leafs this year too, as a 20-year-old. So his tools are really translatable to a bottom 6 role, but they're not impactful. They're not. It's one of these guys that you're gonna like to have him on your team, down your lineup. But you can find players like him through trade, through free agent signings and things like that. So easy money for me for Toronto to move, but it's fine for Boston to get. Will Zellers, super evasive, speedy forward, loves to beat opponents with some like dynamic work and complicated rush patterns, and he's got quick execution and all that stuff. Really prolific prep school producer, but it's translated really well to the USHL as a D+1. So off to North Dakota next year. He's a project player, but he's got offensive skill. So it's like one of these darts that you throw at the board and you hope that something sticks, and you get enough of them. Maybe one of them does turn out to be like kind of a second line elusive offensive player for you, whether it's Zellers or, you get 5 or 6 of them and another one of them works out. It's just, those are risks and little lottery tickets that you're happy to get. So I think it was fine what Boston did. I just don't love that they have this plan that seems to be going zigzagging on rebuild and win now sort of thing. So hopefully they can just pick a lane and stick to it long term.
Yeah, and I think, some of those veteran signings that you talked about are absolutely, the kind of signings that can kind of take you off that course, that you're now misdirected a little bit and your team's a little bit worse, and where does it go from there? And I think that that's going to be one of the trickier things. Just to point out, Will Zellers, second in the USHL in scoring, has 38 goals though, so he leads the league in goals by a considerable margin, and 40 is a pretty magical mark in that league if you can hit it. 42 games played for him so far this season, so 38 goals. So not terribly far away from a goal per game, but I agree with you completely. I think it's more of a project style. It'll be interesting to see how he translates to North Dakota. I think North Dakota's got a lot of guys that are those higher skilled players, guys like Jaden Perron and Sasha Boisvert, and they have a number of players, and some of those guys like Perron and now like Zellers, who's very similar. They haven't necessarily fit the North Dakota mold, so to speak. And so that'll be interesting to see how that translates. North Dakota's been an NHL factory. Guys like Brock Besser and Nick Schmaltz, and especially among those forwards, but it's been a much more better finishing school, mostly for defensemen. So we'll see where it all ends up. I think Will Zellers is a very intriguing talent, a guy that has an opportunity to go play and be there. And then Minten, I think he was a 38th overall pick in the second round. I think what he has become is it's an NHL. I think there's NHL upside. It's just a matter of, yes, he's going to be a depth forward. He's not going to be a guy that's going to score a lot of goals. We're seeing it in the AHL right now, and have seen it when he was with the Marlies. I just think that there's going to be, a lot of work to be done. And obviously these are not central prospects to your rebuild or retool or whatever you want to call it. But a lot of interesting things happening across there. And those were some of the more notable players that were involved in trades. And now I kind of want to switch gears a little bit, Cam. I want to talk a little bit about the young fellas, the guys that are percolating, guys that have been drafted and that are doing some remarkable things. And I want to actually point back to a tweet that you had, my friend, this week, regarding one Nick Lardis and the magical number that he hit. This is from you, Cam Robinson. Most goals in the OHL in the last 35 years in a single season. John Tavares, 72. Eric Lindros, 71. Nick Lardis, 70 and counting. Pretty remarkable. Nick Lardis is a Chicago Blackhawks draft pick. He is playing for the Brantford Bulldogs. He is a 5'11" solid scorer. He scores, and he has scored in most places that he has been. But he has never scored to this degree. And quite frankly, most people have not. We haven't seen this in the OHL in some time. 113 points for him, 61 in 61 games. So 70 goals for him this season. He was a third-round draft pick, 67th overall. Now the big question is, when you have that many goals, the expectation level changes for you, at least publicly. People are going to see 70, and that's what they're going to think about. Has the perception of what Nick Lardis is as a prospect changed for you amid this tremendous run that he's on right now?
Yeah, I think it has to. I think you pop 70, that is noteworthy. And you do it as a 19-year-old too. Now, we will say that Johnny T scored his 72 as a 16-year-old, and Lindros did his nuts. 71 as a 17-year-old, right? So both those guys were underage players, not even draft, right? So big difference for sure, but still, nobody else has scored 70 in the L, right? Like there's been a whole lot of good goal scorers in that league that have been playing there at 19 years old, and they didn't crack 70. So this is highly impressive. And yes, Jake O'Brien and Patrick Thomas are feeding him pucks, and these guys are jacking up assists at an extreme rate, especially on the power play, by feeding it to Lardis, right? And so everybody's having a good season there in Brantford because of it. And it's kind of a group effort, I think, a little bit, but still, you have to give credit where credit is due. Now, whether or not it's translatable to the NHL, that's the big question mark, right? Is that I don't expect him to come up and become, like even like a Cole Caulfield type of scorer where he ripped 70 for the program there in his draft year or something like that, right? Like I don't see him being like someone who's going to threaten for 40 goals every year, but I do think that this is indicative of his IQ, his nose for the net, his finishing ability, his ability to get shots off quickly and accurately. Those are all really good things. It's just he's going to have to now prove that he's skilled enough, he's quick enough, he's smart enough to get the best playmakers, to get all the power play ice, to get that soft spot on the ice when you are on the power play. And that's going to be the difficult thing. So fortunately in Chicago, they don't have a ton of talent at this point. I think that they're going to go out and they're going to spend a lot of money this summer and next to try to buy some of it. And that'll push him and his kind of landing in the NHL further down the line. But he's still a project, I think, even after this monster season. I still think that it's someone that you could be like, yeah, this is great. And the upside's there that maybe he could become like a really nice supplementary goal scorer for them, a 25, 30 goal guy maybe in his prime. But I still think we should hedge our bets on how good this player is going to be long term. But this is absolutely like a solid jump in production. And you have to reevaluate where you looked at, because before I looked at him as like a tweener. Is he going to be an NHLer at all? You pop 70 now, right. I'm like, okay, you look like you got enough juice to get there at least, and then let's see how far you can develop and get into good spots.
Yeah, and I think I'm in agreement with you. I think if you're a Blackhawks fan, look at the numbers, get excited about them. That's great. But I think you do have to temper expectations for what that actually means. And when you're a 19-year-old in the OHL, points should come more easily. Not like this. I'm not saying that this isn't special, because it really is. And you go back through time, the guys that have even scored 60, even back like 25 in the last 25 years, it's not a large number. Some of the names on there, though, you've got Patrick Kane, you've got Brett McLean, a couple of guys that had there are big stars, and then there's Alex DeBrincat. There's some players like that, Justin Brazeau as well, who's now a member of the Minnesota Wild after the trade deadline. So that's the thing, is that these numbers, especially for some of these older players, will come. And I think the thing for Nick Lardis and the thing for Chicago Blackhawks fans to understand, especially for junior hockey, he can do a lot where he doesn't really have to be playing all that hard off the puck. Like, he's not exactly a defensive mind. Like, to have 70 goals in the OHL, you have to cheat a little bit. And I feel like he does a little bit. I think I've noticed that a little bit more in his game. What I will say, though, is that he can score in a variety of ways. He has a good sense of time and space. He can score from distance. He can score from in tight. He'll get to the places he needs to create offense. But there is going to be a learning curve once he gets to the AHL next year, and he's going to have time to figure out, how do I get into those spots against pros? How do I get into those spots where, and how much playing time am I going to be able to get if my game away from the puck isn't where it needs to be? So again, I think it's about tempering expectations, but not discounting what's happening, because there is something special going on there, and you have to do it. So I like where he's at. It's a big boost, and it's a great opportunity for him to continue doing the thing. So we'll see how far he can take this, and how the playoffs go, how everything else looks. But I do want to change to another thing. And if you're a Nashville Predators fan and you're sad about the season, I totally understand. But there's something really good happening at the college level if you're a Nashville Predators fan. And you've got a couple of guys that have risen up the charts, and they might not have been the guys that you expected. When you look at the college hockey leaderboard, you say, maybe Ryan Leonard is going to be up there. Maybe it's James Hagens. Maybe, how high is Zeev Buium going to be? And Isaac Howard was on a tear for a while. The top two scorers in college hockey are Aiden Fink and Cole O'Hara. So those are names that, if you are not a diehard fan or a Nashville Predators fan or a fan of Penn State or Massachusetts, UMass, you may not know who those players are, but those are two of three players with 50 or more points. Jack Devine from Denver, the other. And O'Hara is a junior. Fink is a sophomore. And I mean, these are two players like, Cole O'Hara didn't have a great book on coming into the year. Aiden Fink was a player that I definitely liked in his draft year, had him on my list, but certainly did not have these expectations. He was a 7th round draft pick. O'Hara himself was a 4th round draft pick. And Cam, I mean, these are two guys that are very much in contention for the Hobey Baker Award, not just because they're leading scorers, but because they're playing a significant role on teams that are outperforming expectations. So I know it's harder for us to track the guys that are in their draft, +1, +2, +3, what have you. But I mean, if you're a Nashville Predators fan, you got to be feeling good that some of these depth draft picks are performing at such a high level.
Absolutely. And like O'Hara, he's more of like one of these guys that you are happy when your team signs him as a college free agent. And you're like, look at those numbers. That's pretty strong, for his age.
Mm-hmm.
He's not doing that in 19 or 18 or 20 even. But Aiden Fink, a little bit younger, still a 7th rounder, still a project, but he's killing it for a 7th rounder, right? And so not the prettiest skater, right? Not the prettiest skater out there, but my goodness, just pushes incredible pace, right? Like pushes every single play to the max, constantly battling for inside position, hardly ever gives it up. So uses that pace to overwhelm opponents and then get inside position. And so it's been a really nice jump up for him this year. I still, unsure of how translatable it's going to be into, like, say, a top 6 spot. But like I said, for a 7th rounder, his development has been really, really strong. It's been a nice, especially for his age, a nice productive season for him. So all the feathers should be given to him, all his roses there. So I think that he's like someone that fans in Nashville should be like, legitimately, this guy could be a player for us. And when you can pull a player out of the 7th round, even if it's a guy who ends up playing, 300 NHL games or something, like that's a coup. That's a huge win for your scouting staff. So yeah, absolutely on Fink.
Yeah, I think just getting a 7th rounder under contract feels like a win, I think, typically. And I think this is a kind of guy that you would spend a contract on, because there's a lot there. Penn State just last week eliminated Michigan from the Big Ten tournament. And in one of those games, Fink had 4 assists. He played upwards of 26 minutes in the game, and it was a 65-minute game. So he was in these key situations, and so that's big. Meanwhile, you look at UMass, I didn't have a lot of expectation for, but Cole O'Hara has made it, and he's 22 years old. So, like, you're right. If this is the kind of guy you get a little bit more excited about if you are signing as a college free agent, but he's not that far removed from the draft. He's a 4th round prospect, but last year he had 18 points. The year before that, he had 17 points, and now he has 50 points. And sometimes there's a shift. Sometimes there's one thing that happens. You never really know. He's shooting the puck a heck of a lot as well. But you look at just the level of consistency that he has brought, and all of a sudden you've got a team that feels like, hey, we're actually on the cusp of something here. You got UMass is right now, they're 11th in the pairwise to get into the NCAA tournament as an at-large. They're a threat in the Hockey East tournament. So those are two guys. If you're the Nashville Predators, you're saying, wow, those are not what we expected to get out of those players, and now you have it. So I think that that's a great thing. So if you're a Predators fan, again, it's the same thing. Be excited, temper that excitement, but understand that you have two players vastly outperforming what you would expect them to do at this stage of their careers. So I think that's a very important one as well. Cam, I want to keep it with college hockey because I think there are some players potentially that are going to be able to, the trade deadline's passed, doesn't mean you can't add players that will make an impact for you. As we look at the playoff race and we look at the teams that are, in it and want to be, a factor. Obviously Washington has been amazing this year. Minnesota has been kind of up and down, but they're in it. I think those are two teams that potentially could have some of the better post-deadline acquisitions, and that would be Ryan Leonard for Washington and Zeev Buium for the Minnesota Wild. I think both of those players could come in and make an immediate impact. What say you?
I mean, I think that they absolutely could. I wonder, I just look at that Capitals lineup and I'm like,
Right.
Where are they putting Ryan Leonard in? Where's, they just added Beauvillier. I think they'll find a way. I think that that's going to be part of the carrot is like, hey, come sign your big league contract and we'll get you some minutes here. But I don't know if he's going to get regular minutes unless there's an injury, to be completely honest with you. They've got something cooking in that dressing room and it's jiving well. The chemistry is strong. So he might come in and just play, a couple down the stretch in the regular season, and it might be just a black ace or something up in the press box. So we'll see about that. And then Buium with Minnesota, I do think again it's another one where they'll sign him and they'll get him into the lineup. And there's some guys there that they could probably bump down and have them sit out a little bit. John Merrill or Declan Chisholm, who maybe isn't long for that team either. But I don't know if either of them are going to play like big minutes for them. The guy I'm wondering about is Snugs, is Jimmy Snuggerud. St. Louis is still in this wild card race, right? And he's I think he's got a really translatable style. I think that they're going to want to definitely bring him out as soon as his year's done too. And that there has been some concerns that maybe he wouldn't sign with St. Louis. I was told earlier in the year that it was just more of that, he could make that NIL money and he was feeling pretty good about staying in college and having a good time and making some cash, and that he was still okay to sign with the Blues. So I do think they're going to definitely use that NHL deal as a contract and burn a year off his ELC by getting him some NHL minutes. So Snugs is someone I'm watching that maybe could come in and draw in and play a little bit of a more prominent role. Tom Wielander, Vancouver again is another team that's right in the playoff mix, and they're going to look to bring him out of school. I'm pretty sure it's I don't think he's NHL ready, but I could see him getting some minutes, and especially that blue line is kind of hit or miss on the right side. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of guys that we could see coming out and getting NHL minutes. I just don't know if any of them are going to actually see prominent roles down the stretch here on a good team anyways.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to say. I mean, I could certainly see, I think back to when Chris Kreider came out and, won a national championship, comes in, joins the Rangers in the playoffs, and then was able to get into the lineup, made some ground. I do think that Washington at least has to see, they have to, and hopefully the thing is that the NCAA national championship is on April 12th. So, you're limited in terms of the amount of time you would have a player available to you, and you got to get that contract done right away. There's a lot of different things kind of at play, but, I think you have to at least explore it. And I think in the case of Zeev, we'll talk about him again a little bit later, but I just think that that's another player that could potentially help you more than what you have. But it is, you think back to, it's a tough comparison because obviously he's just such a tremendous player, but Cale Makar and the amount of an impact he was able to make for Calgary or for Colorado. Let's get one of the C teams there. Yeah. Colorado against Calgary, in the playoffs. And so, I think that they can help. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that's the other thing. Do the teams need them to? And that's always a question that's there. And I think if they don't, then at least maybe they can go play in the World Championship or something like that. But hopefully they, get an
Yeah.
opportunity. But I'm glad you brought up Jimmy Snuggerud too, because he is currently fourth in the NCAA in scoring. I think he kind of had like a little bit of a lull at one point this year and then just took off. And it's the goal scoring has been there, 22 goals for him, 27 assists. I'm really impressed with him overall. But I think that is another one that is kind of a sneaky ad that you can make going forward. But there's a lot of other players too that are potentially going to earn contracts. We're going to talk about some free agents here in just a second, but I did want to go bounce back to a couple of already drafted players, and I wanted to keep it with the Washington Capitals because I got to talk about, one of the since he's not leading the league in scoring, he's not necessarily talked about as much, but Ilya Protas with the Windsor Spitfires is doing something really special this year. Over 100 points. He has been a legitimate goal scorer. He was playing for the Des Moines Buccaneers in the USHL last year, and there were a lot of teams that were saying, we're hoping that he slips. We're hoping that we can get him in a reasonable range for us. We hope that we can get the guys really, but there's a lot to like about this Ilya Protas. The Washington Capitals draft him. Alexei Protas is his brother, and he's been unreal this year for that Washington Capitals team. Like that's a guy, like
So good.
maybe you were like wondering what's the next step for him. Well, we found it, and he's really good at hockey, and he's a legitimate playoff player. But I mean, like if you are the Washington Capitals and you're thinking Cole Hudson, and you're thinking about Ryan Leonard, you're thinking about these guys, and then all of a sudden you've got Ilya Protas coming along. I mean, suddenly you've got one of the better teams in the league that is starting to get a loaded up prospect pool. And that is a player where I believe in the jump. I've seen the progression from the player. What have you seen? And I mean, like, this is, has a higher points per game rate than Liam Greentree, who was a first round draft pick on his team on the Windsor Spitfires. So, I mean, it's a pretty incredible run he's on.
Oh, he's ripping it up. He's ripping it up, and not a small man either, right? Like his big brother. He's 6'5", and he's a horse, right? He's got the frame that you're looking for from a power forward. And I will say, is that forever my concern is the foot speed, right? That is what held him back in his draft year, and everybody could see it. Everybody could see like the raw power, the raw skill that he had, but it's like, can he get there in time? Can he get to loose pucks? Can he beat guys wide? Can he get to the inside? Can he constantly do that? And so, the move over to the OHL, I think it's safe to say he's doing just fine at this level, but the questions will remain until he's doing it at the NHL level. But I do love that his brother's popping off, because that's like, you can almost give him a little credit for it too, a little boost to his stock. We're like, well, big brother had similar issues finding a way to get it done. Like he might hit 40 this year if he stays hot down the stretch. Definitely getting 30. So yes, I think Washington, right? Like we almost had them cooked. It looked like their team was aged out. The contention window was done. The prospect pool was like, other than Ryan Leonard, you're like, bunch of maybes. And now it's like, well, Hudson's having a great year. Cristal, right? All he does is rack points. Protas here. So they've got all these guys that it seems like it's almost found money that they're getting outside of round one. And then still, they've got their Ryan Leonard, and they've got this current team that's really big and really skilled that is under contract for a while, other than Ovi. They've done it's very rare, and I don't say it often, but they've officially like retooled on the fly, and it seems like they've done it effectively. And so many teams have tried to do it, and almost all of them fail miserably. So kudos to the Caps. And yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting for what they have coming as well too, which is not too often we see for a top team in the league.
No, it isn't. And I mean, like, yeah, you think about those guys, and then there's, Cristal, who you mentioned. I mean, like he has 63 points in 25 games since moving over to Spokane, playing alongside Berkeley Cat, and he's leading the WHL in scoring in 123 points, 78 assists for him so far this season, 45 goals. I mean, it's just a remarkable season. Tarek Parasak is still pointing up,
Mhm.
82 points for him. Eric Smateko, who is one of the breakout stars of the World Juniors, doesn't necessarily have the big time production, the QMJHL, but you see that frame. Ivan Rashashenko, he's gotten some time in the NHL already. 35 points in 37 games for Hershey in the AHL this year. So, you look throughout and the guys like Ethan Frank, who you signed as an undrafted free agent, and players like that are coming through and making an impact for your team. It's amazing how well things have gone for the Capitals this season, and how well they continue to go beneath the NHL. So pretty remarkable stuff. As I mentioned, Andrew Cristal, incredible, but he's also, I did want to touch on his, the guy that he's been running roughshod over the league with in Berkeley Catton, who has 106 points this season, third in the league, just behind McKenna. I mean, you've got a number of players with 2 points per game. Catton is one of them with 106 points in 53. I mean, man, it has been fun to watch, and the fact that both he and Cristal are on the same line, are in the same team. I mean, how do you even hope to stop that offensive attack? I think you don't. I think you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Super impressive. I mean, they ran into Everett there last night, Wednesday night, and of course I picked Spokane to win at home. Everett without Carter Bear, and Everett still came up big. So it's a couple of juggernauts though, in that division. Like those two teams are jacked up, right? And Cristal and Berkeley Catton are, if it's not them, it's they're two of the top 3 offensive players in the entire league, right? Obviously Gavin McKenna is still cruising around. I mean, it's interesting because the West has become less translatable, I would say, to the NHL game in recent years. And so it's allowing these players who love to use time and space to create, and that is Cristal and that is Berkeley Catton, and that they're able to, attack through the neutral zone with some pace and then slow things down and kind of have that wide leg approach, heads up, wide leg, shift, shimmy and shimmy, and then they're like waiting, they're opening up seams, they're opening up lanes, they're really cerebral with their approach. And it's working because a lot of the defenders kind of slide back, and there is more space as you enter the zone, I would say, nowadays compared to the Western Hockey League in years past, and definitely compared to the NHL level, where you're going to get stood up at the blue line a lot more by these big, powerful, speedy defensemen too. So that is my one concern about the league in general as like a feeder league to the NHL. And that's a bigger topic that we can get into when we talk about players looking to leave there to go to the NCAA to get a more pro style game. But I think it really helps and aids a player like Berkeley Catton, a player like Andrew Cristal, these guys that are not big. Catton's got better speed, but it's they use their handles and they use their patience and they use their time and space really, really effectively at this level. But I do wonder when they run into all-star NHL defensemen who are 6'3" and can skate as well or better than they can and are super physical and then step up and remove their time and space so quickly, is how effective are they going to be at the NHL level? And that's where I sometimes we see these monster gaudy point totals that are kind of erupting year over year in the West. And I'm like, and I'm guilty of framing it in historical lenses on Twitter, because that's just what Twitter's all about, is you find an interesting stat and you put it out there without a lot of context. But if you want to sit down and talk to me about that, whether or not it's going to be effective long-term, it's like, I might have a different bend on it. So I do wonder about that long-term, but you can't really say anything in negative, because they are taking what is given to them. Right. And that's what a smart hockey player will do, is that you have a defensive matchup in front of you and you pick it apart. And that's, what more could you ask for? Like, sure, you want them to burn guys in an NHL way every single time, but maybe they don't have the skill set to do that, or maybe that's just not what the defense is giving them.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's an interesting thought too on the WHL, where things are, and also on those those particular players. But I do think, like, adding the historical the historical numbers to it, it gives you some context to what kind of what they're doing. But yeah, I agree. I think to a certain extent, there's a little less that you can potentially glean from the numbers, from the pure numbers of what's happening. Before we move on from the WHL, I did want to kind of quickly touch base on Cayden Lindstrom. We've seen him. He's been able to skate a little bit. He's been able to practice, but there has been a lot of talk about what's next for him. What is the next step for him in his development. And there has been talk about, could the NCAA be the best path? I think Aaron Portzline was maybe the first to put it out in terms of hey, this is a possibility. What do we think about that? What do we think about, potential Cayden Lindstrom, number 4 overall draft pick, hasn't played all season? Is that the correct next step for him?
I'll start off by saying, boy, did the CHL screw up by not giving Medicine Hat the Mem Cup next year. And I think that was a big fumble by the CHL, because it probably would have been enough of a carrot to maybe keep Gavin McKinnon around. We'll see. Maybe he still sticks around. Ryder Ritchie, Cayden Lindstrom, these type of guys, like they could have had all of them in the lineup next year pushing to host a Memorial Cup. And they might not have any of them next year now because of that. And so, yes, I saw Portzline's report on that. And, I've kind of tried to be front and center on some of these big name CHL players that are considering going down south. And, I've been checking in even this week on some of them. And I think some prominent names are starting to dwindle down the number of teams that they're talking to and that they're interested in, while still remaining focused on the season that they have right now with their CHL clubs. And even like a player like Michael Misa, who I reported, that had, a potential framework in place with BU or months ago, is that he's played so well that I wouldn't be surprised if the shift in mindset for him and his team there is that his agency, I should say, is that, he could legitimately play in the NHL next season. And so don't bother committing to a school. I think the focus is probably making the NHL next season. And then once you get drafted, having those discussions with the team that drafts you on what they think is best for you. If they can envision you coming, if they're like, we want you to come to camp and battle for a job, or if they're like, what, we think you're better served to go play in the NCAA rather than going back and try to rip up 150 points in Saginaw. So a player like him, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't have a decision on him until either after the draft or even after camp. But players like Cayden Lindstrom and Gavin McKinnon, those types of guys, I think we'll probably get some word on them earlier than later. But with Lindstrom, it's all about health, right? It's so if he feels like he can get more time in the weight room training when he's playing at Ohio State or a different NCAA school where they have a more training focus during the week, and then you play on the weekends, and he's such a big body guy that, I'd be totally fine with him going down there. I did check around and the response was, we're considering everything. Schools are talking, they're interested in bringing him in. Obviously, everybody's kind of interested in everything at this point, even at this late in the season. So I wouldn't be surprised if he went down south. I wouldn't be surprised if he was back in Medicine Hat. I wouldn't be surprised if he was with Columbus next year, if he was able to get healthy and have a really big camp, because he's such a unique presence. But that would probably be the least likely, just because of how much time he's missed this last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think the development loss, the time lost is significant enough where you do have some concern. You say, okay, well, we need to figure out what the best path forward is. And I think, potentially not riding the buses, getting those 2 games a week and kind of having a little bit more of that dedicated plan could be the play for him. But time will tell in all that. But I mean, I think that you're right. We're going to start seeing and hearing more about this in the summer, which is going to be very interesting for NCAA teams when they usually know what their roster is going to look like next fall. By then, obviously, players sign contracts. You have other things, players could be pushed aside. There's a lot that'll happen. Teams will do whatever they have to make themselves better. And so that means that, a lot of these players, they'll wait for them if they think that they'll help. And sticking with the college theme, one last topic. It is college free agent season, Cam, and it's not a great class this year. It's not an exciting class. Colin Graf was kind of the top prize last year that a lot of teams were chasing. The San Jose Sharks got him. We've seen Justin Hristkovian, who had fewer suitors, but a lot of teams very interested in terms of what he was going to bring. He's been a great addition to the Texas Stars in the AHL. He's also gotten some games in the NHL. There aren't players like that a lot of teams are in on. I think there's a lot of guys that are just kind of like, if you like a certain thing, they might appeal to you. But I've got a free agent guide coming out. I know that also Elite Prospects had one out or has one out that you can check out. But just a couple names. I think the one name that you'll see on pretty much every list is Carson Dorwart from from Michigan State. He's a good two-way center, a guy that plays a pretty impactful game for Michigan State. They have a chance to go on a deep run, so he won't be available for a while. It's also important to note that none of these players, would be eligible for the playoffs, and I think most of these players wouldn't really be helpful to the NHL roster right away. But you got a couple of big guys from Holy Cross, Liam McClinsky and Jack Stockfish, both 6'3" or taller, putting up some good numbers. TJ Hughes, who doesn't have the size but has quickness and skill, and has done really well at Michigan State. Luke Hames at Dartmouth has been a name that's been out there for a number of teams, and there's a whole host of others that you could potentially talk about as well. Cam, in this lighter than average class, anybody in particular that you liked, or that anybody kind of like, yeah, that could be a guy, I mean, like, that kind of feels like where we're at. It's like, he could be a guy, maybe, I don't know, maybe.
I wish I had some sort of like, here's the guy, here's the nobody's talking about. I mean, like TJ Hughes is always like, for several years, you like look at him, you're like, there's some skill there. That could be an NHL player, right? And he keeps developing and he keeps going back. And it's like, that could, but he doesn't have the size, like you said. And so I don't watch enough college on a regular basis because I'm so focused on the draft class or the draft -1 guys that I leave it to the pros. I leave it to the guys that really scout that, and to the pro scouts on the NHL side. But it's always so unique. And we talked about it off air, is that some guys that, we're watching and we're like, teams have to be interested in this guy, right? He's got the size, he's got the skating or whatever, and then doesn't get a contract. And then there's some guy out there that, put up 6 points and he's a junior and, never on my radar, and he signs, and you're like, what? And so teams definitely have their preference, and they see something in a player and they go with it. But nobody obvious this year that I would say from my vantage point anyways. But like you said off air too, there's sometimes there's that Tyler Bozak, there's that Chris Tanev, there's these guys that really come out of kind of nowhere. And maybe it's just like they have no points, but they're defensively just so sound, and they have kind of that Gumby-like ability to absorb physical pain and punishment and block shots and stuff like that, and they could carve out themselves an NHL career. But these are always like extreme lottery tickets, I find, when you're signing these guys at 22, 23, 24 years old, because they should be NHL ready at that point. And none of them really scream being NHL ready at this point. Although Colin Graff came out and he's done pretty well, nearly a point a game this year for the Barracuda, and has saw some NHL action. So I think that as of last year's class, wasn't that great either, I wouldn't say. And he was the top dog. And, it looks like he'll probably be an NHL player, but we'll see how impactful.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I mean, in terms of like, the other thing is that I think this is a great time to find those extreme depth pieces, guys that are going to help your AHL team as much as they're going to help your NHL team. And then also, there are guys that could potentially fit roles. Like, you think over the years, guys like JT Brown, Andre Schuster, they're guys that play that they're like your 12th forward, your 7th defenseman, your 6th defenseman, players like that. And then if you're lucky, you get the Chris Tanevs, the Brandon Tanevs, the players like that. So there's a lot of interesting guys there. But I would say that one of the more like NHL caliber kind of players is like where he could potentially fit a role that kind of fits that mold is Josh Earnesty. He's a big guy, pretty quick. He gets hard on the forecheck there. He does a lot of different things. Well, does not score, but that's a player that you say, okay, well, there's something there, like in terms of the energy that he can provide to a lineup, the physicality, things like that. I think John Prokop from Union is another one, a bigger defenseman, or a puck moving defenseman, a guy that has some smoothness to his game, has some size to him. Players like that are the ones to watch, but we'll see where it all goes. But like I said, is it the best? Probably not, but it's not nothing. So did want to touch on a couple of very quick stories in the NHL draft world as well, Cam. And the first is, you'd been saying for a while, hey, let's keep an eye out. Big Raj is coming back. Roger McQueen, he is back. He did get a boarding major in his first game back. I think first or second game back from injury. He has 2 assists through 4 games. I haven't had a chance to watch him since he's been back. I don't know if you have, but any obviously him being back in the lineup is a big story for the draft coverage and for this draft class.
Yeah, just getting healthy, right? Getting back and healthy, especially with Cayden Lindstrom, missing the entire year here with a back injury, big body guys, right? Like you get concerned. I don't think anybody, including NHL scouts, is really expecting him to come back after so much missed time and really pop. Hopefully he does. He's got a couple points, but he can see that the timing's off a little bit. And it's really interesting is that I was talking to one NHL scout and he basically said, like, what more do we need to see? Like, we know he's a 6'5" center who's got, handles and everything. It's just like, it's the end of the day. It's like me putting him on my list on a pure like upside potential. You can make the argument that he's 1 or 2, but if it's me as a GM and I'm making a pick, like, how comfortable am I even taking him at 5, right? Or am I like,
Right.
I'm going to probably hedge and go with this guy who maybe doesn't have the pure ultimate upside that a guy like McQueen has, but is far more likely to just be a good player for us. So he's going to be one to watch, especially with guys like Jake O'Brien, who's just like having a monster second half. Really cerebral playmaking, has good size too. And you can see when he stacks on weight, like what he could become. It's like, I've got him 5 on my board right now, ahead of a guy like McQueen. So I think teams are going to fall in love with some players and that they're going to be a little gun shy with McQueen. So if he's there at 8 or 10, 12, like that wouldn't shock me. Even if he popped down the stretch here, is that he's probably like the draft's biggest wild card. And maybe Carter Bear now too, with the Achilles injury too. Those guys are really kind of be like complete wild cards on draft day.
Yeah, that's the injury thing. It's tough. And I mean, you look at the situation with Cayden Lindstrom, and we talked about, he hasn't played this year, and you don't know when he's coming back. You don't know what that's going to be. And, it was a risk that everybody knew going in, and Columbus said, yeah, we'll roll the dice. And I think it's a lot easier to roll the dice at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 than it is at anything inside the top 10 for Roger McQueen in particular. So a lot to, but yeah, I mean, you could potentially look like a genius if you do it, but you could also look like somebody that didn't pay attention to the signs. You did mention Carter Bear, done for the year. Everett Silvertips, really talented goal scorer, a player that we both really like. But yeah, you report he's out with an Achilles injury. Thinking back a couple of years ago, Peyton Krebs sustained an Achilles injury right before the draft. I believe that was in training. That's a tough one. That is a tough one. And I think it's one that you have to assess fully. What do you think is going to happen on that front with Carter Bear?
What a bummer. He's a great kid. Like, not only just like a really exciting player who just kind of vaulted up drafts lists. We love him at EP too, right? We've had him in and around our top 10 for most of the year, and that's higher than most. And his on-ice game has got hard skill. He's nasty. He's got that wicked release. He pushes pace. He plays the middle of the ice. Like, he's got all these things going for him. And then this is just like a brutal injury too, right? So, the fact that he's going to need surgery and it's going to cost him the year, like, I don't know what the time frame is. Often an Achilles laceration like that, where you need surgery, it's like, it's 9 to 12 months. It's a long spell that he's going to be out for. And I'm hoping that that's not, maybe it's going to end up being better once post-surgery or something like that, that it's not going to take him out all next season too. But I think this is obviously going to hurt his draft stock. And Peyton Krebs, like, that one was so close to the draft that he definitely fell because of it. Like, he was projected to probably go 6, 7, 8 and ended up at, what did he go, like 17 or something like that, if my memory serves.
17
and I don't know how nailed it. I don't know how much that's impacted his development. I'd love to pick his brain about that. Is that, because I really, really loved him as a draft eligible too. And he's really struggled, obviously, to find his game at the NHL level. So it's you're hoping for the best for a really good and kind of has this infectious personality, this really good kid that you're rooting for, that I personally am rooting for anyways. But he's going to slip. He's definitely going to slip, but he has top 15, top 10 skill. So does he slide all the way to 25? Does he slide all the way outside of round 1? And if he does, now we're into like steal scenarios where it's like a team will be like, well, we've got a second first late here. Let's take a swing on this kid who's obviously better than where this position is. And we can just wait and hope that he heals well, and that maybe it takes an extra year of development before he gets to where he's going to get to, but that he can recover from this long-term and be like an impact player. Because for my money, that kid's got that like top 6 skill with the jam that you pay big bucks for in the playoffs. So I really hope that it can work out for him. And it was funny. I was talking to my 9-year-old and I told him what happened to him. And he's like, well, he'll probably get drafted by a better team now. I was like, that's true. He's probably going to go to an organization that's got some more depth and is stronger talent up front, that they can rely on giving him the patience and the time that he needs to get back to where he hopefully can get to.
Yeah, just looking back at it too, when Peyton Krebs did suffer the Achilles injury, he did not play until late November or mid-November the following season. So he did have a pretty decent recovery timeline.
That's pretty quick,
but that's not bad. But I mean, did Peyton Krebs ultimately become what we thought he was going to be as an NHL player? Probably not. I'd say, not for a 17th overall pick, and that certainly plays a role. So we will see where that all ends up with Carter Bear. A couple of other just very quick things. Matthew Schaefer still out. The hope, I believe, was that he could potentially be back by the playoffs. Might be a little bit into the playoffs. We'll see exactly what happens there. I think the last update Dave Brown gave was, essentially that they were hoping that after the surgery it would be an 8-week recovery. It's looking closer to 12. So that is kind of the hard part of where that is. But I don't think that has done much to diminish Schaefer's draft stock. I did also want to point out that in the final 8 games that he's played, or the most recent 8 games that he's played, Anton Frundell over in Djurgården has 14 points. So look out for Anton Frundell, who has decided to reestablish himself as one of the top guys. It's been interesting. And then on the flip side, James Higgins, who's basically at 1 point per game, which is great for a college freshman. It is not great if you are trying to be the number 1 overall pick. And I think that the ship has certainly sailed on that. But, the question is now, where does he go from here? So, and you talk about guys, think about guys like, Porter Martone and Jacob, Desnoyers, and you think about all these other kind of players that are hovering around him, McQueen, even, O'Brien. You say, okay, well, is there a chance that he slips out of the top 5? What do you think?
I think there is absolutely a chance. And a part of it, I think, too, is expectations and then reality, right? So it's like he was coming in with such lofty expectations. And so you're absolutely right. A point a game season is nothing to sneeze at for a true freshman, right? Like that is
right.
For most players, you're like, whoa, that's good stuff. And I mean, like Jonathan Toews was under a point per game when he was at Nodak there as a whatever year that was. And he went 3rd overall, but a different player, different qualities. So he wasn't just built on all offense. And, the goal scoring, I think with Hagens too is an issue, right? So, 8 or 9 goals this season. So he hasn't been able to put the puck in the net. He's kind of been a passenger many nights that I've checked in there too. It's that he hasn't been driving play. He's been kind of looking off and like hoping to get pucks in good spots, but not really creating space for himself. So there are guys that are climbing quickly. And I know this, that NHL scouting staffs love a riser. They love someone whose developmental arc is trending upwards, and they're a little hesitant, a little gun shy on players that are either stagnating or maybe even dipping down a little bit. Now, there are market inefficiencies with those type of players too, where it's like, we trust this player's skill, we trust their pedigree. Yeah, things didn't break right in the back half of their season, but we still believe in this. So then they feel like they can get good value on guys like that. But, we look at like Beckett Seneca last year, right? Like he shot up because he had such a monster second half, right? Nobody projected him to go 3rd overall or, back at Christmas or something like that. So I do think that he's at risk of falling out of the top 5. Frundell is really climbing. I would like to just throw a little bit of cold water on him. I know some people think we at EP are too low on Frundell. And I've been accused of it myself. And like, I keep watching these games. Like I just watched one the other day. And he was really good. He was very good. And he scored a goal and he set up another one for Victor Eklund. I still don't think that he's like a locked in top 6 pivot. Like I think that he might be more of like a shutdown guy, like Anton Lundell, like, who's a really good player, someone you want on your team, someone on a really good NHL team like Florida. He's a 3rd line center and he's impactful and he's going to get some points, but I don't think he's going to be a star. And so where did he go? Where did Lundell go? 10? 10th overall? I think Frundell's
Yeah.
probably more of that type of player rather than someone that's, there's some people out there that are really hyping him up as like he should go 1 or 2. And I'm just like not quite there yet on the skill IQ package with him. He's big. He skates pretty well. He's got a good release. He's defensively, on top of things, but I don't see like electric stuff from him that's really screaming like a really big point producer. And to be fair, like Hagens hasn't been showing that stuff either, but I do think he's far more dynamic than a guy like Desnoyers or Frundell or someone like that too. But it's Jake O'Brien. He's the one I tweeted it the other day too. He's the sneaky one for me. I think that he is going to a team is going to fall in love with him and they're going to jump on him early. He's kind of got a bit of Elias Pettersson in him. I would say that he's got the lanky frame with the great handles, really thrives on the power play. He's the one for me that I think is going to bump some guys out and could even bump out Hagens.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch because, I mean, James Hagens has certainly been, the way things have kind of trended for him is certainly, notable. And then, we've seen all this other movement. One thing I will say about Anton Frundell, in 29 games, he has 25 points, 0.86 points per game. That is the highest point per game rate among under 18 players in the Allsvenskan. William Nylander had 0.77 points in his 17-year-old season, and David Pastrnak had 0.67 points. So it's that adding that historical context. There's a lot of other factors at play. You can't just say it, make the 1-to-1 comparison, but we're just throwing it out there. There's that historical context. It's going to be very interesting to watch the top of the draft and how it moves. And even with, does Schaefer get back in time? If he's not back and if Erie gets bounced, does he go to the under 18 Worlds? Like all these other things kind of come into the picture here. A lot of hockey left to be played and a lot of things left to be decided. So that's good. We're going to move on from there. We're going to go to our Beyond Belief segment, which is going to cover a lot of the topics that we've talked about, a few other ones in there as well. But we talked about this a little bit. I want to get your thoughts a little bit more in depth. So Beyond Belief, we give each other a statement. We decide if it's beyond belief or if it is believable and true. And so, my friend, I got to ask you, Carter Bear's injury is going to significantly diminish his draft stock. And by significantly, I mean, we're talking 10, 11, 12 spots. What do you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it will. I think, and it sucks, and I've said all the reasons why, but I do think it will, that he could have been a guy that went around that 8 to 12 range, and now I'm thinking he's going in the 20s or later. Is that I think teams will be scared off a little bit by this injury, and it's too bad, but yes, I do think it'll greatly impact his draft stock.
Yeah, and I feel similarly. I think in other years it would be worse. But I think that there's the one thing is that the lack of excitement once you get out of a certain range. He's in that group of players that when healthy, you're more excited about than I think what is available. So he may not fall. Like, I don't think he's going to fall out of the second round. I don't think he's going to fall out of the second round. But it is no longer out of the realm of possibility, and therefore no longer it is not beyond belief, I would say. So yeah, but it's very interesting to see where that's all going to go. But it's a wrench this late in the process.
Yep. Okay, I got one for you here. Zeev Buium will play a top 4 role for the Wild in the playoffs this spring. It's a big ask.
It is a big ask. I'm going to say it's beyond belief, but I am going to say this. It's only beyond belief that he will play a top 4 role. I think he will play every day in the playoffs for the Minnesota Wild, assuming health, availability, all those things. I do believe that Zeev Buium is better than what they have currently in the depth of their blue line. I think he gives them an element that they could use. The fact that, Spurgeon is healthy and other things like that, that's helpful to them. They don't have to lean heavily on Buium. They don't have to put him on a power play unit. I do think that he will be a guy that plays his way into minutes in the playoffs and plays well enough. So beyond belief that it's top 4, not at all. Not at all beyond belief that he will be on their postseason roster and potentially making an impact for that team.
I want that to be right. I want that. I want him and Faber to just chew up 25, 30 minutes a night, like right out to shoot. I think that'd be great.
Just
But I'm
do
going
it
to say it's
now.
beyond belief.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen that he's going to be maybe see some time, maybe in and out of the lineup, and they're going to go gentle on him and maybe Brodin comes back or something like that and fills in a spot. But yeah, I'm going to unfortunately say beyond belief, but I'm hoping I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, the Brodin factor is absolutely a big part of what the potential is going to look like and his health and everything else. But yeah. All right. There's been a lot of chatter about this, so I figured I'd throw it into the Beyond Belief segment just to give us a little opportunity. Lane Hutson is the first rookie to hit 50 points this season. Has he become the new front runner for the Calder with his production and the historic numbers he is putting up with the Montreal Canadiens?
This is really tough for me because he's been just money in the bank for my fantasy team too, and I gotta love that I love that for the Crazy Joe Davola team. But Dustin Wolf is the only reason. No offense to the rest of the Flames, not, Jonathan Huberdeau has had a nice bounce back, but he is the reason that they are in, battling for a wild card spot. He has been so impactful for that team. It's really hard for me to say that any other rookie has been better than what Dustin Wolf has done for what is in front of him and the position he has to play and the amount of rubber he's eaten. He doesn't get a lot of run support there in Calgary. I have a hard time not putting Dustin Wolf as my front runner, but if I'm going to put anybody, it's going to be Lane Hutson because he has been just so electric. And he's probably going to hit 60 points here. And when was the last time we saw a rookie D-man hit 60? Was it Nick Lidstrom? I don't even know. I'm going to have to look it up. He's been so good with the point generation, and he's been really good down the stretch here too. So it's a 3-horse race. Max Celebrini's still in that race too. But for me, I'm going to stick with Dustin Wolf at right now is my front runner.
Yes, that's fair. And I think it's going to be interesting to see. I still feel like Macklin Celebrini is still the betting favorite to be the Calder winner. At least he was the last time I checked.
He's got the name. Got the name factor,
absolutely.
right?
And I mean, you think about it too. This is voted on by the media, but you look and actually looking back at, I went to under 21 defensemen to hit the 60 point mark in the NHL all time. And it has not happened since 1988-89 when Brian Leetch had 71 points as a 20-year-old for the New York Rangers. So this is pretty bananas stuff.
Rare
here.
air.
Lane Hutson. Yeah, Lane Hutson with 51 points could potentially hit 60 if he does that. He's now 2 points away from what Quinn Hughes did as a 20-year-old defenseman. He is 7 or 8 points away from what Drew Doughty did as a 20-year-old defenseman. I think it's been lost to time that he has 59 points at such a young age. Bobby Orr had 64 as a 20-year-old defenseman. I've heard of him. Ray Bourque, you look at this list. It's Paul Coffey, Phil Housley, Larry Murphy, Brian Leetch, Phil Housley again. Those are all Hall of Famers. Larry Murphy's again, Phil Housley again, because he played 3 years before he was 20. Scott Stevens is on this list. Ray Bourque, Bobby Orr. It's bananas. So we're talking about some, obviously you put it into that context and puts a lot of big names in it. So I do think that Lane, because of that, is going to leap into the front runner status. But I agree with you. I think Dustin Wolf needs to get more attention for this award. If you are the starting goalie for a team that had no business really being in the playoff chase or anybody expected to be in the playoff chase, and you're putting your team in there, you have to be considered. So I think that there's absolutely a chance that it's going to be Dustin Wolf. And again, you still can't count out Macklin Celebrini, because who wants to say he doesn't go on a 10, 12 point run here in the next little bit. One other note on Lane Hutson, 1 point behind Connor Bedard right now. Just putting that out there.
To you.
For no reason at all. So anyway, we move
there you
on.
go. Chris Peters says, Lane Hutson better than Connor Bedard. You've been radioed. All right, I got one for you here. Beyond belief, or is it believable, Nick Lardis will be a consistent 30-goal scorer in the NHL? What do you think?
I'm going to say it's beyond belief, but I do think that being a consistent 30 goal scorer versus being a 30 goal scorer in the NHL is a pretty significant gap. There are plenty of guys that have popped a 30 goal season. Being a consistent 30 goal scorer, and then there are guys, like they're not always the stars that can do the consistent 30 goal season. Brock Nelson's a guy that's had 30 goals quite a lot. Bobby Ryan
Multiple
had a
times.
number of consecutive seasons with 30 goals. So and that's a really good thing. Based on what I've seen from Nick Lardis Jr., and this is why we say, be at least a little bit conservative about when you see those big numbers in junior, what you're willing to apply. You can't ascribe this kind of status. Being a consistent 30 goal scorer means you're an exceptional player, and there's so many different things that you do well. But I think for me, Nick, he's probably, I think 20 goal scorer is a very reasonable thing. I think that's a possibility. I think that, I was like you. I didn't necessarily see him as a surefire NHL player coming into the season. I think now he's proven that, hey, there's a lot to his game. There's enough there. I think we'll be able to better assess him once he's in the AHL, where it is a lot more difficult to produce. But now he's got this pedigree, and now he's got these expectations raised. So I'm excited to see what happens. I think that's why it's beyond belief. But I think this is a player that has significantly changed his trajectory and what we think of him and what is possible for him based on the way that he's developed over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I like it. I'll stick with what you said.
Okay, that's great. That makes it easy. All right, now let's get crazy. Let's get upset. Let's get the people going. Obviously the big talk, and this is our final segment. You have to pick one where we give an either or scenario, and we can agree or disagree. Well, you never really know what's going to happen. This is a tricky one though. Obviously, a lot of talk about the Carolina Hurricanes, the work that happened, the Mikko Rantanen trade, and then the other Mikko Rantanen trade. And I want to bring this down. Like, to me, it's not about Mikko Rantanen. It's about how you started and how you ended, right? And how you started was with Martin Necas on your team. Another year on his contract? Obviously there have been some disgruntled nature, all that stuff. So you got Martin Necas, and you end up as the only NHL roster player that you're getting, that you expect to be like kind of that long-term piece is Logan Stankoven. So you've got a choice, Cam. You go into the deadline with Martin Necas, you come out with Logan Stankoven. Which would you have preferred? And you can, and if you want to explain it as the here and now or long-term, that's up to you. But who would you take in that 1-for-1 if we want to do it that way and oversimplify what Carolina did?
I'm not allowed to include the first say. I just got to go roster players. Okay.
Just the obviously 1-for-1. And that's important. Like, let's give them credit. Like that's a different, this is not the full value of the trade does not rest on these two players. Right. But if you had to start with one and end with the other, who do you want?
I mean, I think there's two answers to this, because Carolina obviously is going for it, right? Like, they sold a bunch of prospects and a couple picks there for Jake Gensel last year as a rental. This year, they rolled the dice on Mikko Rantanen, thinking that they're going to be able to extend him. And then, so that's what's kind of muddied the waters. I think if you had taken that package that they gave for Rantanen and you sent it to Dallas for Stankoven and 2 firsts, you'd be like, that's pretty good. But it's pretty good long term. It's not good for right now. Like, Marty Necas has got 70 plus points this season. Logan Stankoven is not that player yet. Marty Necas has 1 year on his contract, and he's 26 years old. And I don't know if he was sticking around Carolina past next year if he was still a Hurricane. Logan Stankoven looks like he was born to play for the Hurricanes. I love Logan Stankoven. I've loved him since he was a draft pick. I loved him before that. He was an amazing Kamloops Blazer, great in the community, captain, just like a horse of a player at his size. He's built like a fire hydrant. I am such a fan of his. I think he's going to fit in perfectly with Carolina long term. He's going to be a serious asset for them. But he's not going to move the needle a ton this year when they want to move the needle. So if we're talking about for this year and this playoff run, give me Marty Necas. If we're talking long-term franchise viability and years of control and no baggage attached and all that drama that has kind of followed Necas and the Hurricanes around there, where he was disgruntled and there, he's been in trade offers plenty of times. Give me Stankoven long-term for sure. But it is, I think the whole thing is that Narek Tulski, who I have a ton of respect for, He took a chance. He took a chance. He took an educated guess that they were going to be able to extend Mikko. I don't love the fact that they flipped him. I think that if you take a chance on a player like Mikko Rantanen, that it's like, well, nobody's going to offer us anything that's going to move the needle like he's going to in the playoffs. So let's run it out and let's hope that he turns out to love Carolina thanks to a long playoff run, or maybe we just win the cup and that's all you play for anyways. So I don't love the fact that they flipped him, but at least they flipped him for Logan Stankoven, who I absolutely adore. So I'm not sure if I answered that question at all, but I will stop saying words now.
Well, I think it's fair to point out, like, I think for a long-term play and team control, that is a thing. I'm going to go in the opposite way, and I really want to focus on the short term, because to me, Carolina was cooking on their way to, being a Stanley Cup contender. This diverted from that course. And I too have a ton of respect for Eric Tulsky. I think that I want more general managers to go for it and to make those risky plays. But you see what Martin Necas is to them and what he was this season, above a point per game player, a center, a guy that plays with pace and is driving things and is really taking a step amid whatever turmoil was ongoing. And then he goes to Colorado and he just fits in seamlessly. It gives you that almost hindsight. So I love Logan Stankoven too. I also really love Seth Jarvis. I think now you have two of them on your team, and that can work. But it's like, what do you go around with those guys? You got to find some more size. You got to go out of your way to find a little bit more, girth for your roster, essentially. I love both those players, and Stankoven's been, I'm just like you. I've been a big believer in what he is, and I think he is the prototypical Carolina Hurricanes player. The question is, are they a better Stanley Cup contender now than they were when they had Marty Necas? And I think the answer is no. And I think that if that proves costly, it feels like a bit of a fumble, even though it was that calculated risk. You swung for the fences. When it was Dallas that was in there, to me, I mean, the pie in the sky, it was never going to be Wyatt Johnston. That's the pie in the sky. He was never going anywhere. But at the same time, it's like, if you gave up your center, a guy that's going to play a big role, you got to try and get something of similar short-term value. I mean, Johnston, it's a totally different long-term proposition than any of those players. But boy, I'll tell you, it's a tough. I think if I'm a Carolina Hurricanes fan, that whole situation was a tough pill for me to swallow. Because I felt like I was in a position to do something special and then deal with Necas in the offseason, right? It was a huge risk. I love when GMs take risks. This one was one that I felt didn't ultimately pay off. But long term, you do have Logan Stankoven. He's a great player, so enjoy him. He's also a fun guy. I think people like him. So all those good things.
I would have also said this, is that if they, and I think that this was part of Dallas kind of dragging their heels on getting the extension done to culminate that deal for Rantanen, cost the Canes the ability to flip one of those first rounders to get a player that would have helped them today, right? Like they could have flipped that first and something Kotkaniemi for Brock Besser, who they could have injected. And now you could be like, okay, now at least you have a former 40 goal man that you're sliding in, that now you got Stankoven and you got Besser, right? Now you've got a little, but they ran out of time, and that really hurts them, because now they have those first, but those first aren't doing them anything right now. They've got cap space too, but it's just like, it's not useful for you today. Unfortunately, this isn't a one and done team, right? They are built to, they're one of the younger teams in the league still. And they just got younger. Yeah. So it's like, they do have a long shelf life and an open window, but so now watch for them to use those picks and to do some big buying in the summer or something like that too, in free agency or in trades, or getting creative, because I think that they would love to add like another impactful center too. So they're always a team to watch. And I think with Tulsky at the helm, like it'll never be boring. He's going to be thinking outside the box and getting creative and trying his best to make this team as successful as it can be.
Yeah. I like it. I mean, I think that we kind of need that, and player movement like that created some of the best storylines of the entire day and entire week. And, coming out of the Four Nations, we've had a lot of exciting things to talk about. So that's the other added benefit. Cam, before we get out of here, why don't you tell everybody what's coming up on Elite Prospects, what you got cooking, where you're going to be?
Yeah, so working on some stuff, working on some things here. Talking about we'll look at some guys maybe moving down south to the NCAA as those things start to percolate a little more as we're getting into it. Obviously, we got U18s coming up, so I've refocused now that the deadline's done and getting back into scouting heavy, getting ready for those U18s, getting ready for the draft guide. And film rooms will start cooking here at EP, and yeah, go get that app, everybody. Go download that app. Start checking out the feed. It's going to be like TikTok for hockey. We're starting to load it up. It's a really cool feature. So honestly, people, you don't need a subscription to go and all you got to do is click follow on a player or a league or a team, and you get your feed rolling up there. And it's some pretty good stuff to just like catch little glimpses, little videos, little updates, little tweet like length articles and stuff like that too. So get the app, get the feed, and check us out.
Yeah, very, very useful and very exciting to see all of that coming to fruition. Obviously, a lot of big things coming up throughout the hockey season. But as of right now on FloHockey, you can catch the ACHA National Championships. You can catch the Atlantic Hockey Playoffs still ongoing. Also, very excited for our American subscribers. You can get the SHL playoffs. A number of select games will be available on FloHockey. So that's the Swedish Hockey League. The postseason is here. Watch your favorite prospects as they go for this SHL title. There's a lot of excitement around that. So if you're an American subscriber, you can get that English commentary broadcast of the SHL. Obviously, the AHL and ECHL ramping up towards the postseason. So much to watch. USHL is closing in on the postseason. All of our junior A leagues also in playoffs or about to begin playoffs. So make sure you are subscribed to FloHockey, and the annual subscription will get you through all the way to next year's playoffs. Why don't you? So go ahead and do that, and make sure you are signed up to see some of the best hockey of the year. And yeah, lots of other things coming along, draft rankings and college hockey previews and all sorts of stuff. College hockey free agents also coming up. But that is going to do it for this week. And before we get out of here, we do want to say a quick thanks to our friends at Wonderful Pistachios and remind you that pistachios are known for their protein power, fiber, and better for you unsaturated fats for a combination that may help keep you feeling fuller longer. Once again, thanks to our friends at Wonderful Pistachios. Cam, it's been fun, buddy. We got a lot of stuff to cover here in the next couple of weeks, a lot more draft stuff. We're getting into mock draft season too, so stay tuned, everybody. I'm sure we'll be doing a few of those along the way. So make sure you are subscribed to this podcast, leave a kind rating and review. And yeah, let's go ahead and do this again next week, buddy. I think we're gonna have some more fun to be had. All right.
See you there.
For
Looking forward to it.
Great. For my pal Cam Robinson, for all of us here at FloHockey and Elite Prospects, and we want to say thank you for listening, and we will see you guys next week.